Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, the creation, chapter number 9, verse number 12. Aho kastam aho nyayam yadyum dharmanandana jivatum narhata klishtam vipna dharma chutashrayah. Aho kastam aho nyayam yadyudam dharmanandana jivitum narhata klishtam vipra dharma chuta ashrayah. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Bhishmadev said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God, and religion." Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthira was disturbed due to the massacre in the battle of Kurukshetra. Bhishmadev could understand this, and therefore he first spoke of the terrible sufferings of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was put into difficulty by injustice alone, and the battle of Kurukshetra was fought just to counteract injustice. Therefore, he should not regret the great massacre. He wanted to point out particularly that they were always protected by the Brahmanas, the Lord, and the religious principles. As long as they were protected by these three important items, there was no cause of disappointment. Thus, Bhishmadeva encouraged Maharaj Yudhishthira to dissipate his despondency. As long as a person is fully in cooperation with the wishes of the Lord, guided by the bona fide Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and strictly following the religious principles, and one has no cause for despondency. However, tiring the circumstances of life. Bhishmadeva, as one of the authorities in the line, wanted to impress this point upon Pandavas. Okay. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nidramane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschata Desitarne Vancha Kalpatarupiyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayavacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So today's verse again. Aho kastam aho nyayam yadyuyam dharma nandana jivitum narhatam klishtam vipra dharma achyuta ashraya. So before I speak a few words on this topic, this is actually a very wonderful verse, very instructive verse, I would say. I'd like to seek the blessings of all the Vaishnavas. I'm neither qualified nor do I have any good realizations. I was actually thinking about this verse last night, what would I speak? Honestly, I didn't have much of a realizations on this verse. But then somehow, I came across one lecture that really touched my heart. A very, very short and sweet lecture. So I thought I will repeat those points. And I was also appreciating as I was, listening to that lecture and reading this verse, right? Yesterday, there was very nice discussion in yesterday's class after Pratibha Prabhu very nicely laid out the pastime of how the Pandavas have suffered, and especially how Bhima, was protected by the Lord, right? So the question of discussion at that point was, how does one attract the attention, or how does one attract the the protection of the Lord. I think Bhagavatam is so wonderful when you get one question and you're trying to contemplate on that question. Just continue reading, and then you will find the answer. So apparently, the answer is in the next verse itself, right? So we can. I'll try to explain how I see this verse and how we can attract the protection of the Lord. And this is actually no credits to my own realizations. It's something that I heard from a lecture here. So, and I thought, let's also spend some time in looking each and every word of this verse, because it has very, very deep meaning. If we try to take some time to look at each of these words, I think it will give us a deeper conviction in the process that we're following and what we're supposed to do. Aho means oh, custom, what terrible sufferings. Aho, anyayam, what terrible injustices. Yet, because Yuyam, all of you good souls, Dharmanandana, sons of religion personified. Jivitum, to remain alive. Na, never. Artha, deserve. Klistam, suffering. So I intentionally am stopping here. I'm not going to the last line. So we'll revisit line 1. So if you look at this, aho custom, aho nyayam, when you look at the translation, Srila Prabhupada is saying, Vishmadev said, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations. So this is very powerful, right? Because the amount of sufferings that that the Pandavas went through, and Bhishmadev is saying, you did not deserve to remain alive because of the amount of sufferings that you were going through. So indirectly, he's saying, if it was somebody else, they would have just committed suicide. That was the amount of suffering they were going through. See, and when you look at the sufferings also, he's dividing them into 2 categories. Now, there are terrible sufferings, meaning natural calamities that came upon them, right? They lost their father. It wasn't the fault of anyone. It was providence that they lost their father. And imagine, being in the position of a prince and then falling down to the position of, living at somebody else's mercy. And one should understand also, right? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, for one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. So we should understand in a natural situation, when somebody has come from such high stature, and they have to come to such low stature to live at the mercy of somebody, and these are pure Kshatriyas, right? It is worse than death for them. And that's why we see here, the tribulations that they had to go through, meaning they had to live at the mercy of somebody else. That's worse than death. And the second thing is even more painful, right? And we can all correlate to this. Sometimes we question ourselves too, right? When I'm doing the right thing, for example, in this case, Yadyudum Dharmanandana, they are, all the Pandavas are completely, in this case, the verse is saying they're religion personified. They are the followers of Dharma. And when you follow Dharma, Dharma is supposed to protect you. Now, it becomes very, I think each one of us, if you take some time to meditate on this, it becomes very emotional. Because especially, when there is suffering that comes because of natural calamities or whatnot, it's okay. You may feel it's okay. It's my destiny. But when there is injustice that happens, right? When somebody who wants to uphold justice and injustice happens, a simple thing as, somebody did something unjust to us, meaning I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example of something very simple, right? If you want to do something XYZ, and you were favored, somebody else was favored, even though you were more qualified. Let us take an example of work, right? If you are at work and then you are hoping that you would get XYZ, and you are definitely better than the other candidate. Now, if your manager chooses somebody else because they want to favor them, you will feel that it's injustice. And this is a very mundane example. And that could happen in Krishna consciousness too, right? We are trying to serve the Lord, and sometimes because of whatever reason, an opportunity that was supposed to come to us goes to somebody else. You will feel that it was injustice to me. So, especially injustice, you would feel that more pain than sufferings that you get. And for somebody who actually truly follows the path of justice, it's even more hurtful to them. And that's why Bhishmadev is saying, you did not deserve remain to alive, because the amount of pain that was caused both from physical level, a mental level, as well as on the dharmic principles. And then, but how did they overcome this tribulation? Because they were protected by Vipra or Brahmanas, Dharma or religion, and Achyuta or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It was kind of an eye-opener for me when I was listening to this lecture, because yesterday when I posed that question, how did one attract the attention of the Supreme Lord? I was looking at it from an angle where when a devotee goes through some tribulation or some injustice is happening to them, why does Krishna remain silent? Or why does Krishna engage himself? We felt yesterday that Krishna engaged himself and protected them. And then sometimes we may have seen incidents where Krishna may not have engaged, right? What's the difference? I think today's verse is very interesting, and I'll read the last part of the purport. As long as the person is fully in cooperation with the wishes of the Lord, guided by the bona fide Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and strictly following the religious principles, one has no cause for despondency, however trying the circumstances of life are, however tiring the circumstances of life are. So I'll try to give an analogy here, right? So say you're driving on a highway, you're going from your home to your office, let us say in the morning you're driving. And then for whatever reason, you are going off-road. And then you feel that, okay, somebody honked on the car, or somebody honked or did something, and then you came back into the lane. We feel that Krishna intervened in our life, which is true, right? And then somehow gave us that wake-up call to come back into the lane. So what if nobody honked and you hit the fender or something like that, and you happen to be in a fender bender accident, and you were still protected for whatever reason, car got damaged, and you were still safe. So in that situation also, we feel Krishna protected me, right? Because there was a fender there and whatnot. And then you could be in a major accident, but you still saved your life, but we still again feel that Krishna protected me, because at least my life was saved. And then, one may leave their mortal body, but they may go back to the spiritual world for, in whatever circumstances they are in. We can see that Krishna also protected them in those situations. The point I'm trying to make here, I diverted a little bit by going deeper into this analogy. The point I'm trying to make here is, in the first place, when none of this has happened, like, whenever we never got out of the lane, we never hit the fender, or we were not in an accident, Krishna's protection was also still there. So if nothing happened, when you started from home and you reached your workplace safely, now how do you see Krishna's protection there? For a moment, let us remove Krishna, which is not so good. What is that thing that protected you from starting from point A and going to point B, that you reached safely to the other to your destination? The thing that saved you all along while no incident happened is you decided to follow the rules of the traffic. So when we decide to follow the rules of the traffic, automatically you're put in a safe position. If you decide to follow that, I have to drive on the right side, I will continue to drive on the right side. As long as you drive on the right side, there is no traffic coming and there is no danger of somebody hitting you. As long as you follow the speed limit, because the road is designed for certain speed limits, as long as you follow that speed limit, you're protected by the traffic laws. So similarly, 95% of reasons why you are safe when you drive every day is because of your own willingness to follow the rules and regulations of the traffic. Sometimes 5% chances because others did not follow or something crazy happened. There's only 5% chance that other incidents have happened where you were in an accident. So here we can see how they attracted or how they were protected. The Pandavas were protected because they willfully decided to follow Vipra, Dharma, and Achyuta. Despite those 5% were very significant in their life, those 5% incidents were very significant in their life, because of their willingness to do the 95% of following Vipra, Dharma, and Achyuta, that's what protected them. Now, what does that mean? Following Vipra, following Achyuta, and following Dharma for us. Following Achyuta means there are two major ways, especially in Kali Yuga, there are two major ways we can follow Achyuta, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One is by following the Bhagavata Dharma, and the second is by following Pancharatrika Vidhi. Following Bhagavata Dharma means Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. What it is we regularly chant the holy names of the Lord and take the shelter of the holy name of the Lord. We regularly, hear from the scriptures or read from scriptures of Bhagavatam. That is very simple, Bhagavata Dharma. And then the second one is Pancharatrika Vidhi. Pancharatrika Vidhi is worshipping the deity form of the Lord. And this worship of deity form of the Lord, everyone has an opportunity. It's not, for example, we see there are fortunate second initiated devotees who can worship the deity form of the Lord directly. And there are other ways, whoever is not Brahman initiated, they have other ways they can still serve the deity form of the Lord. So the opportunity is available for all of us. And, the other day I was speaking to someone, I think Panduranga Prabhu. When we were discussing this, I don't want to divert much because I want to stay on these principles of Vipra, Dharma, and Achyuta. But, we were speaking, when we're talking about the rituals, we were talking about the various samskaras, why Srila Prabhupada may have not given prominence and whatnot. We see that, in Kali Yuga, none of us is qualified to do such elaborate rituals. But then why did Srila Prabhupada give deity worship? Often we see in our humble temple, we struggle a lot, with manpower or the quality or the level that we should be doing deity worship. And knowing that it's going to be very difficult, why did Srila Prabhupada give us deity worship as one of the important forms? That's because without deity worship, we will never realize the personal conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then I think what I would say is, while, some fortunate people have that opportunity to go and worship the Lord on the altar, but I think that's only for a short period of time. You may go and serve the deity for an hour or two. But when you get down the altar and when you look at the deity form of the Lord, you should feel that this is my Supreme Lord. Or differently said, or more mundanely said, but maybe we can correlate. This is my emperor, or this is my king. I am here to serve this personality, every moment. So in that mood, yes, going back to following on how to get the protection of Achyuta is when we follow the traffic rule of Bhagavata Dharma and Pancharatrika Vidhi, we get the protection of Achyuta. The second one is following Vipras. Now, Vipra means a Brahmana. Who is a Brahmana? A Brahmana is a person who gives you knowledge. If you look at the Varnashrama system, Brahmana is the sole purpose of that ashram or that Varna of Brahmana is to give knowledge. And in a modern term, what I would say is finding mentors. And there is a specific reason why I'm saying mentors, and actually I'm repeating the words from this lecture. It's not just one mentor, it could be multiple mentors. Because you will notice that in life, there are so many activities that we need to deal with. One is something simple, right? How do I read Bhagavatam? Or how do I perform deity worship? A little more lower level, how do I conduct myself in the household duties? If you're following Varnashrama Dharma, how do I conduct myself in Varnashrama? If you're a person who's performing a job, how do I nicely perform my job, right? At work, you may want to you may have to be an expert in certain field. And you will see, for example, Arjuna, Arjuna had mentors in his life. For archery, he had Dronacharya who taught him. For, and we are seeing for the sake of religious principles, Dharmaraj is going to Bhishma Dev. So you can think of this like this. This is a weird analogy, but think of yourself as a king in your life. Can you run the kingdom on your own? No. Find enough ministers to help you run your kingdom. So ministers are meant to give you advice. End of the day, the decision maker is the king, but the ministers are there to provide advice. So similarly, for various activities that we perform in life, for example, as something could be as mundane as how to make money. If you find a mentor, your life is much easier and your energy is less spent. Otherwise, we will find that if we don't have that mentors, and again, I'm totally speaking theoretically, I am a mental speculator, try to do things on my own. But this lecture kind of opened my eyes. It's important to find those mentors for even small things in our life. But at the same time, we need to understand, mentor is there only to give you advice. Yeah, we can speak on that for a little more longer time, but with the interest of time, I want to go to the third one, Dharma. We spoke about Achyuta Ashraya, we spoke about Viprashraya, now we will speak about Dharma Ashraya. Now, how do we obey the laws of Dharma? At a basic level, we follow 4 regulative principles. No meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex. But if you want, that is more like abhidheya, meaning how do you execute the Dharma? But when you go to Sambandha, or what is Dharma, there are 4 pillars of Dharma. The 4 pillars of Dharma are exhibiting the nature of compassion, exhibiting truthfulness, exhibiting austerity, and cleanliness. When we follow these 4 principles of Dharma, we are also going to be protected again. So in essence, this was the biggest takeaway for me, is it's not the Lord coming in, on Garuda and severing the head of the crocodile, right? If we expect that at a moment to moment in our life, then we are not actually seeking protection. We should be seeking protection by following the principles that were given to us. And that itself is going to protect us. The Lord doesn't have to come on his own. And we should see that the protection of the Lord is in the principles that he has given to us. Like Rompad Maharaj always says, empowerment is coming through instruction. So similarly, protection is coming through the rules and regulations that or through the principles that were given to us to execute. Okay, this is what I would like to add here today. Anybody has any questions, comments on today? All right. Lingaraj Prabhu, if there's no questions or comments, we can end it here for today.
Prabhuji, my humble way of expressing how wonderful you are, in this interpretation of this verse as it applies to devotee community. And then I just, from my, for my mundane mind, it is so hard to imagine Bhishma Dev playing his role. I mean, he had to keep silent when all these things were going on. Even in the assembly where Draupadi is being disrobed, even if we think of it as a drama being played out, it's so hard to think that he had to live through these things, being a silent witness to so much of it. That makes me feel. But thank you very much for the very nice talk on this verse.
I'm just repeating what I heard. But yes, I think those injustices, it's hard to perceive. But I think, all the devotees spoke a lot over several weeks. It's just that it's hard, it's hard to understand the Leela of Krishna, right? We often tend to see from one angle, but, Krishna himself, right? By a spark of my splendor, I control, he gives so many things that greatness about him. This is often the shelter that I see. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says, when Arjuna asks him to describe his glories, he gives, I am the king of the jungle, I am the lion, I am the most well-spoken person. And finally he says, what greatness do I have? Just by a spark of my splendor, I'm controlling this whole universes, right? For me, I feel that, Krishna in one act, he accomplishes so many things. We saw different angles, how, one angle where Bhishma Dev had to go through this, of being the bed of arrows because he did not protect dharma. He was just trying to uphold his vow. We have saw the angle where Krishna wanted to glorify. But with one act, there are so many angles in which this covers. So often that's the verse I take shelter. It's hard to understand Krishna and his pastimes and his devotees' pastimes. But I think a very nice way to say is, in mathematics there's a formula. If one is right, if you're, when you do probability, when you do one is the first incidence is right, the second instance is right, the third instance is right, and there are n incidents. But if n plus 1 seems to be going wrong, but n plus 1, we just take the shelter of this n and say, it's just me, I cannot understand this n plus 1. There is a different dimension to n plus 1. Sorry, I was diverting, but yes.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I really appreciated you bringing to that practical aspect, Prabhu. Two things. One is you were mentioning when we are going off the road, even when we don't go off the road, how can we perceive Krishna's protection in our life? So that's a nice thought for me to contemplate, even when, things seemingly going right and I kind of tend to forget and there's not so much of a, that deep mood to take shelter, and then something happens a little bit shaking. Then I come to senses and I'm like, oh, Krishna, sorry, I'm still dependent on you. Thank you for that, Prabhu. The other point is Sandhya Mataji just brought up about, these injustices. You mentioned about these two different types of tribulations that Pandavas have to go through. I'm just wondering, Prabhu, if you could share something. When these tribulations or kind of obstacles coming from providence, seemingly uncontrollable, it's a little bit easier to, it's still not easy, but comparatively it's a little bit easier to accept them versus if they're coming from some other person, that too from a person whom we are least expecting. It really disturbs, and that feeling of disturbance actually takes me completely away. If you could share some thoughts on that, Prabhu.
Mataji, it varies incident by incident, right? I think it is important. Something that I've been contemplating recently is, and this comes totally from the mundane material world, right? The concept of bias, right? What happens is we tend to not separate circumstances, not separate individuals. We just tend to label things to make our life easy, right? We tend to label, this person is always like this, or this is what I expect, but something else happened, right? This is what I expect from person A, but when the person A did something different than what I expect, it seems to be like, it goes away from my bias, right? So I think something I've been trying to contemplate is, how do I remove bias and look at each and everything individually? I know it's a very generic answer to a very specific question, but I am in my recent contemplation, what I'm feeling is, whenever we feel hurt, whenever we feel that something is not happening the way we want it, it's important to first remove our own bias from it. What I mean bias is we put a label and say, this is what I expect out of it, or this is what I judge out of it. When we remove bias, things start to fall a little more clear, and we tend to put a little more thought into things. Rather than just contemplating on the hurt feelings, we tend to put a little more thought in that specific incident or that specific situation. That kind of opens up us to be more open to the situation. Then it also gives us a chance to act upon it. Because a lot of times when we say injustice happened, we feel that we are, we don't have the power to do anything. In this case, I think really what I think despondent, one has no cause for despondency, right? What I felt is, basically, a lot of times what we feel is, we feel that we are stuck in a place when these incidents, and there is nothing for me to act on except to, to just accept it. And when you take that place, and I think I really appreciate His Holiness Prabhupada Maharaj's seminar about, I forgot the exact title, where we went through the exercise of, going through describing situations that we had and how we can react and whatnot. I'm trying to find. This happened in MohanaLila Prabhu's house. I forgot the exact title of it. But I think there is a journey from how we perceive the incident, and then how we dissect the incident and determine, yes, is this something I want to act upon, or this something that I just want to remain quite humble and just accept what it is. If we don't go through that exercise, or don't take the time to contemplate on each one of the incidents separately, and we just generalize, this person is always like this, what happens is, every action that person takes on after we form that samskara or that impression that person A is like this, every action they do seems to conflict with us, or the way we want that person to act. Again, like I said, it could be very specific, Mataji, but I think my recent contemplation was that, how can I remove bias and then decide how I can act? Do I need to communicate better? Do I need to express what I was expecting from this person, but they did something else? At least what can I do from my side? I hope that answers the question. At least that's my perception, Mataji, so far.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Yeah, very, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Please accept my humble obeisance to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhu, I really liked your example that you gave about how we are like compared the driving with the dharma, that when everything goes fine, then we are protected by the rules, right? So that time our protection is that we don't get into accident or something like that. So when we say Bhishma Deva said that the Pandavas were protected by the dharma because they were following the dharma. So what was the protection, Prabhu? That they did not fall from the devotional service? Because anyway, they went through the tribulation. So what was the protection that they got?
That's a great question, Mataji. I mean, I might be speculating here, right? I think Bhishma Dev, what he's saying is you did not deserve to remain alive itself. So could we be saying that if somebody who doesn't fall is not taking shelter of the Lord or the shelter of the principles of dharma and whatnot, would they have just given up, right? I don't know what that given, because that incident did not happen. It's hard to contemplate what that given up is. That's what I can say, but this can be total speculation too.
Maybe it is the devotional service, Prabhu, that although they went through all the tribulations, but still they did not leave the shelter of Krishna.
Yeah, that's yeah, obviously, right? I think that's the highest of all, in the sense like Krishna says, Kaunteya Pratijanati Name Bhaktya Pranashyati. When he says, he doesn't, when Arjuna says, what will happen to a person who's not successful, if he falls down, he's neither in that world nor in this world. And then Krishna gives us surety, Pratijanati Name Bhaktya Pranashyati. He will never lose what he has achieved so far. That's there for sure. Yes, absolutely. In this, what I'm trying to understand here is what is Bhishma Dev intending to say here, right? When Bhishma Dev says you are protected by Brahmanas, God, and religion, what is Bhishma Dev intending to say their protection was? That's what I'm trying to contemplate here, Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu, that's what even I was thinking. Yeah, what was that protection?
That Bhishma Dev was saying, right? Maybe again speculation. Maybe when we look at Sandhya Mataji's question, maybe Bhishma Dev is feeling that he never was, he didn't, I would say, feel protected, but he slipped through dharmic principles, right? By not saving Draupadi, by not standing up for the Pandavas, he slipped through his principles too, right? Yeah, sorry, Mataji, I think I'm going into deeper speculation. Honestly, I don't have answer. Anybody on the call would like to add to this one, please? I think that'll be very appreciated.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisance. So, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Possibly this is just my naive view on it, since this is very new to me. But I think that's simply what he's saying, that because he has their protection, he didn't deserve to go through that. That's all he's saying. But I guess the question is that you're asking why he went through it, that the protection didn't work. Is that the question, I suppose? Because that was Krishna's grand plan, but I don't know if that's helpful or if it made sense how I'm saying. That he's just saying you don't deserve it. That's all. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhu?
No, Prabhuji is trying to...
No, Prabhu, my question was like, Yeah. So my question was, Prabhu, that Bhishma Dev said that yeah, the Pandavas didn't deserve that, right? But they were protected by the dharma because they followed the dharma. So I was trying to understand what was that protection that they got from dharma, because anyway they went through all the tribulations that we cannot even imagine.
Hare, Hare Krishna, Mataji, Sri Vallabha here, if I may offer, a slightly, I won't say different, but it's in line with what was discussed and what MohanaLila Prabhu shared with us. I think very importantly, the protection here is how the Pandavas, even through all their tribulations, were completely dependent on Krishna's shelter. Right? At every given point, if you look back, Krishna's hand was there in everything that he did to protect them. And that dependence, that complete dependence, that Sharanagati is what is very, very, very key here. Right? The remembrance, even Arjuna during the war, during the battle, he was completely dependent on Krishna. It's not like he was saying, oh, I'm the greatest archer in the world and I can go conquer the world. I can do it by myself. Even at that point, he was completely dependent on Krishna. And similarly, the Pandavas, through every single tribulation that they went through. So I think it's that dependence that is their protection, that dependence on Krishna, the remembrance that, hey, Krishna is my ultimate protector. I should depend on him. And of course, through, as Bhishma Dev is saying, your dependence, the Achyuta factor, the dharma, and so on, right? And the vipra. It's clearly talking about that and how even during the tribulations, we tend to get caught up in the, the storm and forget about everything else, right? We become the victims. They didn't feel like they were the victims. Instead, they converted that feeling of being victimized by depending on Krishna and taking complete shelter of Krishna in every single instance, every single tribulation. That is their protection. That remembrance of Krishna is their protection.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. And that goes with what MohanaLila Prabhu said in the beginning, that, the dharma, what is the dharma for us, right? Like Bhagavad Dharma and following our sadhana, hearing, chanting. So then when we do that, then when the tribulations come, then we remember Krishna, right? So that is how dharma protects us, and that is how dharma protected the Pandavas.
Exactly. And this goes back to what Rampad Maharaj did in the seminar for us, right? So it was about responding versus reacting. When we don't have the dependence, the true dependence, that faith is weak, what do? We tend to react. Like I said, we tend to look at ourselves as victims during tribulations, during difficult circumstances. So we react. We react with fear. We react with flight, right? It's the response that is, the reaction that we have is very, very subject to the circumstances that we're in. We completely forget that, hey, Krishna is the one who's protecting us. We should be depending on him. Instead, we need to respond with that. The response would be, I have Krishna's protection and this is Krishna's plan and he will take care of me. Of course, I have to put out the fire that is happening in the house. But at the same time, the consciousness should also be that I am responding with the fact that I am depending on Krishna and I have Krishna's protection. Krishna is there to protect me. So this goes also back to yesterday's lecture that Rampad Maharaj was talking about in terms of why do bad things happen to good people. He specifically addressed this as well, but from a slightly different angle, which is karma plays into this. And karma plays into, since we are in this material world, karma is there for all of us. But again, we have to look at it a little differently between non-devotees and devotees. Non-devotees don't even believe in the principle of karma for that matter, right? They think it is purely coincidental or it's by chance, but then it plays in because every action has a reaction, right? And karma has its own way of manifesting itself, right? It may not happen immediately. It may happen after, later in this lifetime or even after several lifetimes. but it will happen at some point in time, right? And how it happens to even devotees, because even devotees are not bereft of, karmic reactions. But then, since devotees are in the shelter of the Lord, it becomes a token for them. Token within quotes here. Token meaning that it could have been a lot worse. Whereas, the Pandavas could have lost their lives. I mean, they're devotees, right? They are followers of Dharma. They're completely dependent on Krishna. They're in the association of Krishna. In spite of that, even they had to go through such difficulties, right? And such tribulations. And there are various reasons for why that happened. And one of the reasons could have been, we don't know much about their past lives, right? Who were the Pandavas in their past lives? Now, I don't even want to go there. But yesterday, Rompad Maharaj was talking about how even devotees have to go through, some of the karmic reactions. But in that case, the way we need to look at it is that it is a token where Krishna is reminding us, and it could have been a lot worse than what it should have been. And with that, we are able to, with that dependency, we are able to move forward. So there is a role of karma also to play, although here specifically as far as the Pandavas are concerned, I do not want to speculate. But in general, even for devotees, there are karmic reactions, and we see bad things happening to good people as well.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. And I think for devotees, even if there is karma, when whatever touches Krishna, it becomes gold, right? So although it is karma, but through the realizations and going deep into it, the devotees come out stronger in their devotional service because of mercy of Krishna.
Exactly, Mataji.
But in the upcoming verses, it is quite clearly stated it is the time factor which is acting in the lives of Pandavas. So there is more to come in here.
As we go through more and more verses, more and more clarity comes. Right? I think great questions, and I think thank you very much, Srivala Prabhu, Premananda Mataji, and Adam Prabhu for kindly sharing your thoughts. Yeah, I think in conclusion, what I would like to say is, each one of us are giving strength to each other to follow the principles. Alone we could never follow Dharma. Alone we could never follow the principles of Bhagavatam. But as a group, we are able to do within the association. So thank you all for your wonderful association. We'll end it here for today. Grandaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.